GameWorn Radio is on the air.
Hey! Shelton scores! Hopping the Cordova, baby! We're going bowling. Now, let's go hunt moose on a Harley. Fires, he scores! LA face with an Oakland booty. Make me a bicycle. They score! Bowmeister! Pay that man his money!
GameWorn Radio.
Hey everybody, it's Derek, GameWorn Radio, part of GameWorn.us, and I'm here with Casey Samuelson, Dante, Pete Giannakis, Tom Vore. We're going to be trying to talk about a little bit of the history of GameWorn hockey jerseys and collecting and pretty much anything that we can remember. So, some of us are newer to the hobby, so we're going off of what we've heard from some older guys, and some of these guys might have some insight on some of the older days. I know Pete and Casey will be able to shed some light on the good old days, as they call them. I myself have only heard secondhand. Tom, do you have any input? Dan, I know you guys are fairly new, so I know a lot of your information is going to be more secondhand than anything. What do you know about the history?
I just know it was a lot more. It was more of a smaller group of traders. That it was more like telephone deals and word of mouth and meeting in person. And obviously, as time goes on, technology changes, and now it's just like anyone can be a collector. But it was just like back then, it was almost like a secret society. At least that's.
From what I can gather, you're kind of tip on the point there with you kind of had to know people. I know I've seen recently some of the advertisements pulled out of some magazines of jerseys for sale, and the prices on them were just, you laugh now at what it used to be, just because nobody knew it was like such a small market.
Yeah, I think after baseball and football, probably. And then I don't think people... I mean, you saw the jersey cards and stuff like that. You saw the cards. I don't think it was that big. And I don't think you know how to get them if you live near a team, Well, now with the access that we have, you can pretty much get a jersey no matter where you live.
Man, believe this. I have heard stories from some of the old timers of them dumpster diving and getting jerseys.
It wouldn't surprise me. Teams didn't probably know what they had. You probably the same thing with any sport, I think, it's just where was it at? If you never lived in big city, the people that lived in the big cities, Chicago, Detroit, might feel differently about it. How they got started, or how they knew about it, but
I mean, if you go back far enough, we really can't determine exactly where some of these jerseys went. They probably stayed with the players, or they gave them away to a fan, or the equipment manager sold them or gave them to somebody or something like that, or maybe the team held on to them. But when you go back to a certain point, there were some teams were throwing them away. I've heard of people getting jerseys out of dumpster diving back then. Some would just go approach the team, buy entire lots at a time. People, just a full set, because back then, the teams, for them it's just garbage.
Yeah, I mean, they only wore one set a year. Now it's like they're wearing 3 sets, maybe 4 if they go into the playoffs.
It looks like Casey has popped on. Casey?
Yep, I'm here. So just a few thoughts on that, guys, as you're talking about kind of historically where the hobby's been. And Pete, I know you go further back than I do for sure, and maybe can kind of fill in some gaps. But the two primary dealers, if you will, back in the day, really in the 80s and 90s, or early 90s, and then MyGray came into existence around 97. But you had Milt Byron and you had Murph Denny. And you had teams selling stuff, whether or not it was at an equipment sale to season ticket holders and things like that. But those were the two biggest players in the hobby back then. Murph would send out his list, and I remember it would be sent out on like this cardboard paper as the cover, folded in half, and in between would be 8.5 by 11 sheets of paper folded in half, two staples in the middle of the sheets, and it was like a almost a ransom note put together list of jerseys that he was selling, and you flip to your team and hoped that he had some new shirts on the list. And back then I was really only primarily interested in replica authentics. Little did I know I would end up collecting GameWorns, but he had North Stars for $150 and Penguins run-of-the-mill players for $200, $250. I bought a Dan Frawley jersey that was just absolutely demolished for $280 back in 2001 or 2002. So that's really where I started to get exposed to the hobby. Beyond my dad collected the Sports Collector's Digest. My dad was big into baseball cards, and I would flip through and see the auctions, whether or not it was Ballpark Heroes or miscellaneous dealers in Sports Collector's Digest, and it was just a small black and white picture, and that's all you had to go off of, and people phoned in their bids. There was no online auctions at that point, and I'm talking 1991, 92, 93, 94. And I remember as a young kid just flipping through this stuff thinking, I can't afford it, but it's cool to look at because I watched the teams on TV and I knew what the shirts looked like, but I was more into the replicas. And the hobby's definitely come a long way since then. But Pete, maybe you can, kind of give us some insight to what it was like prior to, the early 90s back in the wild west.
Yeah, thank you, Casey. I can go at least around 79 or so. My experience as a 18-year-old after high school was go play on the B team of the Continental Hockey League team called the Chicago Cardinals, and hoping for a call-up. So that was, we were trying to get those jerseys from my time, and it was impossible because they were handed down. Eventually I met a friend of mine who worked at Gunzo's, and I had to go hang out there, and we go play play men's league after he got off work. So I'd wait for him at Gunzo's and stuff like that, and I'd see the equipment managers come in with shirts, leave with new shirts, things like that, and I'd be begging for them. It's like, I need one game-worn shirt. So we had waited. His dad used to sharpen my skates in his basement. He had the old sharpening machine from the Chicago Stadium back from the 60s and 70s when he was grinding skates down there. So I got a connection through the dad, and then met the son, and then we played hockey together and all that, who is now the equipment manager for Chicago Wolves now for over 20 years. I don't ask for any type of connection, nowadays with him for fear of job security for him. I never ask that favor per se. But get to the point where Lou Varga, head trainer of the Hawks, finally walks in the summer of '85 after he get bounced out of the playoffs, and he says, "Louis, will you sell this guy a game-worn Blackhawk jersey?" And I was like, "Please." And he's like, "Come with me." So we go literally out the back door of Gunzo's. I buy 5 game-worn playoff CCM meshes. 2 LC cords, home and road, 1 Bob Murray red, 1 Kurt Frazier, and 1 Steve Larmer white, which I own 4 out of 5 now. I had to buy them back over years, except for all of them. I had sold them and rebought them at some point. So that was my first experience, real backdoor experience back then. But it was difficult. It wasn't my first game-worn jersey. My first game-worn jersey was a 82, 83, I would say, or 81, 82 Masca embroidered Habs Steve Shutt. And it was hammered with all types of repairs on there. I wish I had it. I think I sold it for $750 back then, which is super cheap. But Again, I got the itch to collect. I became a season ticket holder when Dennis Savard came along, and during that time in '81. So I always had the itch to, want to get jerseys, and huge Al Secord fan. I knew a guy that had an extensive Secord collection, which I bought down from him over time and acquired his Hawks Secords. Again, it's all just who we liked at the time. And Casey is exactly right. It's either Murph Denny or Milt Byron. I mean, I used to wait for Milt's list in the mail. I mean, ready to rip the mailbox open.
And he had certain stickers too that if you hadn't bought anything in a certain number of months, you were off the list. You couldn't get his list anymore. Yeah, you were devastated if you got the blue or the green sticker. Basically telling you had to buy, otherwise you're going to be off the list. And that was really your only way to stay up to speed on what was out there.
So that's how that list worked. It was kind of like a time frame, like you have to buy one every so often, or you don't get the list anymore.
Yep, you had to buy a shirt.
Yet contribute to the situation, which was good and bad. I mean, another bad, dumb backdoor deal that I turned down was when Eddie Belfour, when Glenn Hall got his number retired, they took the Eddie Belfour number ones, and they brought him back to Gunzo's and gave him 31 instead. And they were offered to me for $1,000 for the pair, and I said that's way too much. The guy went 1 in 5 and 6 games. I go, he's not going to amount to nothing. And what did I know? I mean, I offered $500 for the pair at the time, which was still a lot of money, but again, unproven player, unproven free agent. The only thing he won was, I believe, NCAA championship, if I'm not mistaken, and that was about it. So, I mean, hindsight's 20/20, and kind of laugh from there. From then on, it was just scattered scenarios until Hawk Quarters came about to start selling jerseys, and that's when I started buying more through the store. It was a lot easier than having to beg people to deal with me in that regard.
So really what we're getting down to is, when we say the Wild West of game-worn jersey collecting, we're really referring to any time before the late 90s. And that's the era of dumpster diving, Milt, going to card show and having the jerseys there, selective lists. And I've heard stories of people, back then it wasn't as easy to find like the network of people, so people to trade with, people to buy from. So it was more like a find your own. And I heard inklings that some people use like Usenet to join mailing lists for when email started becoming popular to engage. But at a certain point, it's in the technological world that we have, it was a bit archaic back then with mailings, advertisements in card pricing guides like Beckett. I believe I've seen some advertisements in there from years ago. Sports card trading show flyers, memorabilia show flyers, things like that. It's kind of what we refer to as the Wild Wild West of the
Yeah, absolutely. And you had in Canada, you had Brad Moore at Fairmore Sports, and there was stuff that you definitely had to be careful with, no matter who you bought from. And that's not just to isolate on Fairmore, but whether or not it was Murph, and Murph dealt both in authentics and game warns, and on his list he basically just listed the size, whether or not there was any game use, and you had to kind of go based on the description. There weren't any pictures. He couldn't email you a picture back then. I would say the Wild Wild West kind of ended or started to end in 97 and 98 roughly, and I would say that meshed with the formation of My Gray with Bob Gray and Barry Mizell, and then also the access to the forum. There was really nowhere else to go to talk about, share ideas, share thoughts other than the forum. That was it. And it was the end all be all. That's where you went every single day I remember when I was in college, 2001 to 05, I never logged off. I was on there all the time because you were afraid that if you didn't check it, you were going to miss out on something. So that's really, in my opinion, when things started to become more mainstream. And it took a while to really get engaged with and grow the hobby.
So
in my opinion, it really started in 97, 98 with the forum and then Migrate.
So did the forum come first with John Nakasone, or did Migrate come first?
I believe Migrate was first.
Yeah, and then the forum.
Yep.
So shortly after Migrate started spinning up the wheels to start developing what we know today, and make some of the great partnership deals that we've seen throughout the hobby these days. Then you've got the GameWorn.net original forums ran by John Nakasone before it was a little bit more, from what I hear, it was a bit of a headache to run at times, and eventually got purchased out by Spivak and Kraut from, if memory serves correctly, and so we had that thing going on there. I'm not sure, I don't know how long it was the forums before it spun into GameWorn auctions, and that started to become the focus. So from the research I've done and all the words that people have spoken, is somewhere around that time of the buyout, the forum ended up shifting focus towards commerce more so than the hobby. I have heard a lot of people, including myself, I know firsthand, getting banned from those forums because of trying to catalog information away from that specific site. So it was like a leash of control, if you will. But obviously they're a major player in the auction industry. You've got them, you've got Classic, Heritage. So you've got quite a few of people hands in the mix there. But when that entire thing developed, the buyout from .net started going into manual membership approval, where you actually had to call to get your account verified if they would pick up the phone. I know it took me 2 months to get my account verified, and I was on there for about a month before I got banned, because I was trying to gather a list of distributors, so where all the jerseys would sell through, because as a newer collector I didn't know. So it'd be nice to know where you can go from the source. And if so facto, come to find out my account gets banned, I don't know why, and somebody found out for me. It's because what I was doing was leading traffic away from their auctions, because people would go and spend money directly with, you know, whoever's actually selling the team jerseys direct or something like that.
Yep, and I think, you know, Derek, to kind of fill in some gaps, and Pete, I know you were a pretty active user on that forum, and what you're referring to, Derek, really is, I think, you know, 2011, 2012, roughly, when it became a subscription-based site. There's a gap there of about 13 or 14 years where that site had, you know, listed, you know, 3,000 or so members, but it was grouped into basically, you know, 10 different categories. You had your hockey talk section, then you had your general auction alerts, Milt Byron section, and then eventually Barry had his own section, and then you had your equipment exchange, you had your jersey exchange, your want list. I think I pretty much covered all of them. Actually, Pete, I was on that site so much I can just visualize it in my head. But each section was moderated by Milt or Barry or Stu Oxenhorn or whoever volunteered basically to lock down posts. But they had no financial interests in the ownership of the site, which made it, they had autonomy basically, in that, you know, if there was a big issue, it would go to ultimately, you know, John or whoever, but you were able to call out other collectors. And I would be the first to tell you that I did a lot of that back then. You know, whether or not it was, and I still do it today, but to me, it was a way for me to communicate with other collectors to help protect them. And I saw people, and that's probably where a lot of, you know, my personality is part of it, but I saw people getting ripped off right and left from things that had happened in the hobby And I won't name specific situations, but it was pretty disheartening. And I knew when I got into the hobby, if I was going to be spending $1,000 on a shirt, which to an 18, 19-year-old kid at the time, that was a lot of money. And I had to protect myself. And I started buying programs and photos, and I'd been on eBay since 1997. And it was a way for me to communicate with other people to say, look, this information is out there. Don't believe everything that you hear. And I'll never forget, Pete, and I think you were at the show in 2003. There was a show in Chicago. And I believe Milt and I had gotten into a spat leading up to that expo. And Milt was there, and I displayed, and it was no big deal. But I remember going to dinner that night, and we talked about it. And I confronted Milt, and I said, Milt, look, you can't just expect people to believe everything that you say, because the evidence is proving otherwise. And unfortunately, the way that the hobby progressed, it moved on from that business model. People were no longer willing to accept the status quo that was around in the 1990s, late 90s, early 90s even.
Late 80s even.
Oh yeah, absolutely. And that's why I'm referring to the Wild Wild West. You basically believed everything that the dealer told you. And I saw people, unfortunately, just get absolutely burned. And it was disheartening, and it made me want to fight back.
Well, definitely. I mean,
Rightly so.
there's I've seen numerous threads on some of the stuff that went down with Milt, and I think he had the best of intentions, and some people have led to say that there were some personal things going on that kind of made things go south, we'll say. And also there was the addition of custom crafted specials, if anybody remembers those. So Custom Crafted was a company that was what am I looking for? They were like
customized.
Paid to customize, yeah. So they would
for several
customize jerseys
teams.
for the teams, right? And they'd put their stamp in the hem. Well, come to find out, hey, it's starting to take off. They're starting to see money getting generated. So the economics kind of takes over a little bit from the honesty portion. And what you see them is starting to put their custom crafted in different things. And I've seen threads of people showing how they would mark up jerseys and things like that to make it look like it was actually game worn. They'd sell it as that, but it really wasn't. And that kind of tarnished it, especially now. People start posting threads with custom crafted jerseys. It's got the custom crafted in the hem. And the first thing that opens up is a huge, long time frame of research on it. Like, is this real? Because they were pumped out. They were manufactured and pumped out, and not honest, we'll say. I'd say that's the best term. So you kind of see that going on in the mix. And I haven't really talked to Milt, and I don't want to I don't know that entire situation, but some of it could have been he might have known, some of it might not. But as you're saying, when you point out the evidence, it's not that you're trying to trash that specific person. It's more or less like, let's try and be educated. And there's different types of people. Like, you have people that lurk around and view the hobby from the outside, and there's people that are passionate about it and want to protect everyone, want to make sure everything that goes through is legit and catch the things that aren't, so they don't keep getting cycled around the hobby and the last man getting stuck with the hot potato loses. It's not what it's about.
Yeah, and that was the whole conundrum was, whether or not Milt sold a bad shirt or not, his mantra, his motto was do your homework. And when people started to be empowered with the ability to research this stuff, whether or not it was online or with their own reference material or video, to prove to someone who was saying, do your homework, I sold you the shirt, it is what it is, and then you look at the evidence says, no, it wasn't. It was really hard to overcome that trust gap again. And ultimately, in the 1980s and the early 90s, Milt was my gray to a certain extent. He had deals with all the teams, He knew all the equipment managers, and when he walked into a show, it was the entire NHL was right there, and you get to pick and choose what you want. And I remember Scott from Chicago talking about the good old days, and that's what they're referring to. And when you had a small, dozen and a half collectors who would go into a show and basically just rummage through Milt's racks all day and talk about shirts.
I think that still happens now, but again, Casey and I have been on the wrong end of a gun, so to speak, several times because of our opinion, and have been brutally attacked on and off forums in that regard because we tell the truth. Because this is not small money that we're talking about. We're a small group, but we're dealing with expensive stuff from $200 to all the way up. In this day and age, and 20 years ago, we just didn't realize. And like I said, every dealer that was out there, we took their word for that. And it was so it's. I don't think every dealer knew exactly what they had either. But on another hand, is we're guilty as consumers that we believe in everything that comes out of their mouth, in that regard. So while I know Casey's very active photo matching, I too want that too. Provenance is huge with me too, because there are certain ways that jerseys come to certain individuals, and I've had a run of luck of late, and been dealing with some ex-NHLers, and they've been, lo and behold, they have a few Hawks in their collection. Why wouldn't they? And which is great. But for the common guys, I'm going to use, for instance, like this last Hawks Winter Classic. Okay, the pricing is what it is. They're getting it at auction. They're getting auction pricing and outright sales. They sold out in minutes. I mean, literally sold out. Once the posting came out that there was, Winter Classics, they sold out in minutes. My reason for this is that a lot of the money spent, you can get very good 80s and 70s jerseys for sometimes that amount of money or even less, which people, don't care about all that much. I know Casey does. I know I do. I'm a big 80s guy, and Casey's a big 80s guy too. And we've seen it. We've seen that, but not a lot of people are going that. And I can even see that with my son, who collects patch goalies from 2007 and forward. Yeah. He doesn't care about the 90s or the 80s and stuff like that.
And I think that's a good point, Pete, because when you're talking about collecting today versus collecting, back in the 90s or 2000, early 2000s, to me, even as I was watching the All-Star game this weekend, I thought, what, it would be cool if, and right, wrong, or indifferent, if Sidney Crosby won the MVP. And isn't it ironic that it took Sidney Crosby being on Alex Ovechkin's team in order to win in any sort of championship? But I digress. I thought it would be cool if Crosby was the MVP and owned the shirt. Well, now in today's hobby, you have the opportunity to own a shirt from the All-Star game. It's going to be available up for auction on Monday.
It's up there now.
Sure. Yeah, it's up there now. Exactly.
They post them before they have them.
Right, and that's fine. I have no problem with that. They're going to post pictures. It's a 4-week auction, so there's plenty of time to get pictures up. But my point is, back in the 80s or 90s or early 2000s, you had no idea when this stuff was going to come up. Now it's much more readily available, and to a certain extent, you can't blame these companies for wanting to take advantage of the opportunity to maximize the selling price for an item that is as popular as it's ever going to be right now at this point in time. And to me, I've had to come to terms with the fact that I may not find a steal on eBay anymore, but I know what I collect and I know what I want, what my focus is. So if there's an item that fits that focus, I'm more than willing to pay a premium for that because it's now available. I have access to it, and I think that's part of the hobby that when we consider pricing, we don't necessarily take into account is you have the opportunity to buy that item. Whether or not you do or not, or whether or not you have the means to do that or not, is one thing. But having the opportunity definitely holds value to me, and I'm willing to pay a premium for that, just given the opportunity.
Yeah, I think definitely there's more opportunity than what there ever was. Obviously I would say one of the most heralded All-Star games was the one here in Chicago because we had the Gulf War and everything else going on, and the national anthem was something to be witnessed. I was at that game. I do own a Dave Christian jersey from that game that I got from auction from the Dave Christian personal collection. I'd love to have a Hawks one, but whatever becomes available, that's what you get. In that regard. So it's a different route, like Casey says. Now you can buy the most popular guy. If you're a goalie guy, you can get your favorite goalie. If you can get your favorite center, or a star, NHL star, you can get anybody you want. Again, it may come at a cost, but you can still get what you want. Where before we would troll forums, newsletters, mailings, phone calls, you name it, just to get hopefully in the door.
So for your current players, what you're saying is the hunt and the wait and the we'll say manifestation of that specific item to appear is over, because we know it's going to come now, and we know how it's going to get there.
To a certain degree, and I'll call out the Hawks for not putting any Cup Finals jerseys out. I mean, because they have them, they would not release them. No one really knows what the disposition is of any of the last 3 championships, which is kind of sad. At least Pittsburgh does put out a set, which I commend them, and it takes time, money, and effort by Joe Toman to do that. But unfortunately, as a Hawk collector, we're deprived from that. So I defer to my old digs, meaning the 80s and early 90s, and I just keep, plugging away at that stuff. So
I would say the Hawks are the last animal of its kind in that respect, as far as like holding
Tampa's
onto jerseys
kind
for
of come
so
like
long.
that.
They've started dumping now. They're dumping all online. They're going through the Fanatics auctions now. They started doing that last year and the year before.
Who's that?
Tampa Bay.
Yeah.
Don't know what they did with their older stuff, but started seeing them coming out with more recent jerseys here these days.
I think they used to give a lot away to their season ticket holders, but I think now they're starting to release. They probably got so many they're starting to release some now.
Well, you remember those auctions? They went for crazy money because people never seen them out in the wild before, and that's really tapered off since.
Listen,
And Derek, yep, go ahead. Sorry,
I didn't pay that much for Stamkos and Bishop finals that I did win on NHL.com before it turned over to Fanatics. So, yeah. So I just, I thought I got a great deal, and I had made them a offer above and beyond that, which they declined, and they said we're just going to roll the dice on auction, and I ended up getting it for far less than what I offered.
And I know, Derek, I know you collect Detroit and you're there, but I can honestly say that if the Penguins sold their shirts through the team store, and I think they're one of the last teams to really go that route. I know the Sharks have their equipment sale as well, but anymore, that's the exception rather than the norm. If the Penguins had an equipment sale where they sold sets of shirts after the season, I would fly to Pittsburgh to be there a day or two ahead of the time to have an opportunity to get the shirts. And I know there's a waiting list involved with the way that the Penguins sell their shirts right now and the request list through the dealer, but the equipment sale route is really becoming the exception rather than the norm, especially for jerseys. Now the equipment sale itself for helmets and jock straps and socks and all that other stuff that boggles my mind that people buy, like the laundry bags. I'm like, who buys the laundry bag? I don't want to touch my own laundry, let alone someone else who's played hockey in it. But anyway, to be local for your team, I think, is a great opportunity. It's not an opportunity that everyone has, and every team handles it differently. So you have to collect according to what the team does with their stuff anymore. You just have to live with it.
Yep. Yeah, we're never going to get to that uniform standpoint because there's always going to be, the money involved, and you're just not going to change that.
Well, they're going to think they can do it better. Someone's going to say, well, we don't like the way we can do it better. And so you just have to live how teams want to sell their jerseys.
It's not about better, though. It's about money. Better and money, not necessarily.
They get in there. They get in there and they think they have the idea. I'm not saying it's better. They think, well, I got a better way of doing it. We want to do our own team sales or a team store. We want to contract through a third person. Because I agree with Casey. Pittsburgh's nuts for jerseys. That you go to a stadium there, everybody's in a jersey. And if they sold the jersey at the team store, you'd have to line up probably 2-3 days early. It'd be that crazy. So they probably save themselves a headache by letting Joe take care of them.
Well, I think the nice thing about Joe taking care of them is it gets the hands in actual collectors. There's
True.
a dichotomy between collector and fan getting a game-worn jersey. When a fan gets it, you start to lose, what it really is. I mean, obviously it's still a game-worn jersey, but there's a little bit more of a intrinsic value when it's in the actual hobby itself than in the hands of a one-off fan, if you will. And we may never see that again until it gets thrown up on eBay and we catch it with the right listing or whatnot. I've seen a lot of stuff disappear through the one-off.
And that's very true, because you're talking let's say a 20-year-old girl, back in the 90s, bought a early 90s Hawks. She's a Hawk fan. She's moved on in life, and things like that. And now that jersey sits on a hanger in her closet or somewhere in storage and doesn't look at it for 20 some odd years, maybe longer. And then, like you say, ends up on eBay. So there's, especially all-star patch Hawks and are really coveted now. So those situations are, whenever one shows up, it does go for a premium because they were sold out of the store. They were accessible to the masses, and everybody bought one of their favorite player, for a very good price. And the store made money, the team made money, and everyone else. Now, to find them at, a decent rate, you're super lucky. And we all know that these things go for crazy money, but it is what it is. And this is why I say there's always, even Pittsburgh stuff or anybody, any hometown scenario, you never know what's in somebody's closet, just sitting around dormant.
Yeah, and you see it, Pete, at the arenas too. There's a Pittsburgh Penguins reporter, and he's left the news outlet that he worked for, but he was a blogger, and he would tweet during the games, but he would walk around before the game and during intermission and tweet out photos of jerseys that people were wearing that were either, quote unquote jersey fouls, the wrong style with the wrong player of that era, or legitimate old timers jerseys. But you would see some. There was a Ron Stackhouse 79-80 all screened on jersey that he tweeted a photo of that someone was wearing in the arena, and that's the thing I think Pete is talking about. That 20-year-old girl who bought one at some equipment sale. She's had it for 20 years in the back of her closet, and then she may go to a game and she's going to pull it out and wear it, and you see it at the games. You just don't see that type of opportunity anymore for items to enter the hobby and then all of a sudden they just pop up out of nowhere. There's generally a trackable lineage from when the item was worn to how it entered the hobby. More.
I've got one better than that one, but I was in the third 300 level, not expensive seats at a game, and I saw a guy walking around, and I actually followed him and stared him down, and he had on a Al Arbor 5960 Hawks Al Arbor with alternate A wool wool jersey, wool jersey and repairs on it, everything. And I just said, where'd you get that? And he said, my brother got it me from Gunzo's as a gift, and I've had it as a gift for all this time, and I wear it to the games. And I was just like, oh my God. It's like, you don't know what you have.
So do you own that shirt now, Pete?
No, I chased him down, and I did offer him a handsome, I'll tell you, I offered him 10 grand, and I'd be at the house tomorrow, and he just, no, I can't take it. I said, well, take my phone number and contact info.
Yep.
Never had it, but
Yep.
I did luck out and pick up El Arbor Cup Finals. So I'm not so enamored that I missed that one now. So I'm okay. I'm gonna live.
Hey, I know a lot of collectors that go to games with wads of cash just in the event that they find one. I've heard stories of somebody finding somebody wearing a mismatched Tomahawk Hawks jersey. Was it the
at the Wolves
red
game
with the green Tomahawk?
They had the home Tomahawks.
Yeah. So they had the wrong one and ended up being able to get it off the person. Let them know, obviously they're straight up with them, like, hey, this is, so and so, and I'll give you a fair price, which is cool for them to do. Obviously, you don't have to do that. Some people won't. But, they'll go to games just on the off chance that you see something that somebody doesn't know that they have. And you'll see that a lot of times the older stuff. I mean, shoot, I've offered people some money, way more than I should, for a jersey that I want. And sometimes, people think that they have something that they don't. It's funny.
There was a quick story. There was back in 2006 or 2007 when I was authenticating for Leland's. There was an older lady in Cleveland who had thrown in the dumpster a 1941 Neil Colville Rangers sweater and a 1940-41 or 41-42 Brooklyn Americans jersey with Brooklyn down the front with the flags on the shoulders. And I think the number was missing on the back, but Leland's ended up getting a hold of those, and I think they sold for roughly $80,000. So dumpster diving, it may have been more of a wild, wild west, but it still exists more recently. I just saw somebody on Facebook, he had that referee's jersey that he got at a garage sale or whatever it was. So it doesn't have to be a huge jersey, but those deals are still out there. So keep your nose to the dirt, and something will pop up eventually, but it doesn't happen as often as it used to, that's for sure.
Yeah, I find these days people tack on the moniker Game Worn to fucking everything these days. It's autographed, so it's Game Worn. You go into a sports card collectible shop and they have Game Worn jerseys on the wall. They're not Game Worn. I heard somebody went into the Pawn Stars pawn shop in Vegas, and they had an autographed jersey up there that they were saying was Game Worn. The collector knew his shit and was like, that's not. And they're like, get out of here, or some shit like that, So it's like, as good as we try to do, as much information as we try to pop out there, we can only protect people so much.
And someone had mentioned it.
That's the danger of the fandom. The whole fanatics getting involved is because fanatics, they got the marketing down pat, right? So they got all the one-off fans. They're buying the jerseys and whatnot. So, but they're not necessarily getting educated on it. They don't know what the difference is. So they might see something out here like, oh, I bought one from Fanatics, so this is probably real too. Without the background.
There's zero support as to what the item really is, because I ended up with a Patrick Kane World Cup, Blue World Cup. They had said it was on another game. It was actually on a different game against Canada. So they don't even have their information straight. And, again, Migray had the system patented down and would obviously catalog everything, which is great. I mean, we try to catalog certain jerseys. I think Casey catalogs anything that comes out of his collection. I should probably do a little better job in that regard, but I don't let go of a lot of stuff that's 80s or early 90s. that I'm usually a buyer in that respect. So I know what I'm buying, and I will help other people. I don't need money for it. I just don't want anyone get ripped off for spending a lot of money. But also, I want them to realize that some of that vintage stuff, like Penguins, early Hawks, 90s stuff, is gonna be a premium scenario, and so be ready. But don't be foolish if you happen to get something come your way and then all of a sudden turn it down because you have an idea of what value is. Because it's not about the value sometimes. Sometimes, let's talk about replacement value. You move up. Let's say you have a certain style, you sell it because you get a better, or you get the player that you wanted. And people say, why are you selling it for this much? Because number one, I'll never see it again. And I'm upgrading to a replacement scenario that's costing much more. So I think they got to know what they're getting. I mean, and they still can't even do it in the modern day. That's kind of my point. They still can't get it right.
I got something coming down the pipeline that we're working on right now that I'm hoping to have before April, but we'll see how that goes because it's really, really intensive with what we're trying to do with it to help out a lot with cataloging, but obviously it's going to take user interaction, people to actually engage. But the other side is, when it comes to something like Fanatics, I really wish we could get them to kind of like promote along with their whole thing, like a little bit of education, like, thank you for buying a GameWorn jersey. For more information, check out blah, 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 blah. Just to like let people know there's resources out there for this stuff. Because right now they buy a one-off on NHL and that's the end of that. And there's so much more. Like, the hobby could get bigger and people could get more educated and protected. Because now maybe they bought on Fanatics, right? So they hit eBay. And you've seen all the shit that's on eBay. If these people knew that there are alternate resources out there, people that are willing to help them out, guide them, all it takes is just a one line, but the money's more important.
Yeah, and I think, Derek, that's a good point. But the difference between Fanatics and MyGray is that Fanatics has no interest in the reseller market. After that shirt leaves their door, they do not care about that shirt again, other than if it comes back and it's not what it's purported to be. But MyGray, they continue to research to the extent that they're getting shirts in, taking things in on consignment. Fanatics is different. Fanatics only cares about the shirt to the extent that it's sold at auction for the highest price possible. And that's their business model, to not do consignments, and I get why they don't. I mean, they have their hand in the cookie jar right now, so they're focusing all of their efforts on getting goal pucks, getting jerseys, getting equipment, and listing it and maximizing that moment. And I'm not trying to be, wave the flag for Fanatics here by any stretch of the imagination, but I think that it's just a different way for items to enter into the hobby. And even an example that I have personally, there's a shirt that I just bought that was worn last year during the Penguins Stanley Cup season, and it means a lot to me personally, because I was with my kids in Detroit at a game and the Penguins won, and that's a moment that I will remember and my son and I will have together. And it's from a special season where my kids and we got to watch the Penguins win the Stanley Cup live in person. And I paid $5,000 more for that shirt than I did when it was at Joe Toman's. But that was a price that I was willing to pay to have that shirt in my collection, to share with my kids for as long as I'm alive. It's not going anywhere. But I think people nowadays, they may complain about the resale value, but if you really bought it and you were willing to pay a premium, did it really mean that much to you in the first place? That would be the question that I would ask. And Fanatics is capitalizing on that, and I get why they do it. And that's how they're different than MyGray, is they're not in the consignment research and help the collector out in the reseller market.
Straight retailer. That's what it is. After once it's, like you said, once it's gone, it's gone.
One and done. Get the money and run.
Right.
I mean, that's kind of where it hurts the hobby and where a lot of people are concerned as well is it's a one and done situation. It's not about getting the right information out there. You know, they have misinformation as Pete led to. They don't know what they have. They say they have something. They're selling you something as they say it is, but it's not necessarily that. And I'm gonna be honest. I'm waiting for somebody to take it to them like, this ain't what you said it was, and take it.
Oh yeah, and I'm sure that it will happen. Absolutely. That's why, and this is just my opinion. The only person I trust in this hobby, outside of some very close friends that I have, is myself. Trust to do my own research, to make sure that what I'm buying is exactly what I've researched and what the evidence proves it out to be. That's ultimately what I do, because I don't trust anyone in this hobby
You
other
can trust
than
me. You can trust me.
Oh, absolutely.
Come on.
Absolutely.
Come on.
I wouldn't trust him.
Who
But-
said that? Who the fuck said that?
There's Tom.
Ooh.
Oh, it wasn't me.
Oof.
And that's one of the things that I wanted to kind of touch on too, with the disappearance of affordable digital research opportunities out there, and I'll put that as blanketly as I can. But it makes me, I'm curious what you guys use nowadays to research items.
Oh, I'm still looking at cards, magazines, you name it, whatever I can with a certain entity that I used to have access to, but through another individual.
Right.
But now that that's gone, I mean, I could use it actually for the Kane jersey, which I can photo match on the thumbnail. And I asked Migray if I could purchase the picture, whatever it is, $100, $150. He says we don't have access to it, and I was shocked. Though their subscription is limited, I guess, to certain situations, and maybe the World Cup has the advantage of that all pictures are copyright protected, so they cannot be sold even through a certain site. Even if you subscribe to it, you get a full subscription. But I think that anything you can get. I mean, I photo matched a 68, 69 Dennis Hull. It took me 7 years. Found a magazine in London, England, from a pull-out section from Winnipeg, and it happened to be Bobby and Dennis together, and he was wearing a jersey. And I was shocked. It took me 7 years to do it, but I did it. So all avenues are open for me. eBay, you name it, whatever I can get.
I also think if it's, people, it's like he said, you trust yourself, but if you can show the jersey to a player and the player can verify the jersey.
Don't matter.
What do you mean?
Players
doesn't
don't
matter?
know shit, dude.
wanna
Don't
bet?
take it to a player. The player doesn't fucking know. They don't know
You want to
shit.
bet?
Yeah, I
to
do
bet?
want to bet.
If you have a chance to talk to a player and show him his jersey,
He doesn't know what he
Big-
wore, man.
and he's been customized,
you.
they know
I'm
the
telling you.
jersey. Okay. I beg to differ, but that's okay.
Do you know how many people in this hobby have taken a jersey to a player and they're like, I don't know? Do you know how many of them have taken authentic to a player and they're like, yeah, I wore that? It happens all the time. They don't know. Players aren't into this shit like we are. They put it on, they take it off, and that's the end of it. Sure, there may be a customization on it, but you know what? Anybody can cinch a hem on a jersey. Anybody can cinch the sleeves. Like if I wanted to manufacture a jersey that looked like a jersey that a player wore, they ain't gonna know.
I can say that they don't know either, because I did a trade with a player, and he did not know he sent me what was a ceremonial worn situation, and I knew it wasn't a gamer, because they don't give them anything near a game worn for any like ceremony from a former team. And he's saying, oh yeah, I wore that down when I was with that team, and then when it came here, I was like, we got a problem. He's like, oh, just send it back, and then it's like, we got it back, and he sent me another jersey, and in place of it, in which I was okay with. So they do and they don't. Tony Esposito, I showed him his mid-70s jersey. He goes, I couldn't tell you what I had for breakfast yesterday, let alone remember if I wore that.
I didn't say it was a perfect guarantee, but I've showed
No, I know that.
the players,
I'm saying.
and they verified them. They said, "Yeah, I
Player
wore that jersey."
verification doesn't tell you anything. I've seen players write letters of authenticity for jerseys that are fake or not authentic or game worn or anything like that. You see it all the time. Gretzky doesn't even know his own freaking jerseys.
Yeah, so I mean, you know, I think there's a lot going on for them where they don't care what they put on their back as long as it's hung in their locker, and they go from there. A lot of them don't take notice of it. A lot of players, honestly, I dealt with a player that thought he came up with the Hawks in '83, thought he was here forever. He only lasted 17 games, never saw another NHL game in his life. And you know, it's just one of those things where
I'm not saying it's 100% bad all the time. I'm just saying it's not letter of the law. It's not go up to a player, hey, did you wear this? Yeah, man, I wore that, and that's 100%. You can't do that.
I think we all bear responsibility as buyers, you know, in that regard, and whether buying, trading, or gifting, you really have to. Provenance is one part of it that I think has to make sense, and then the rest is up to us to get all the details figured out. And they certainly don't know 100% because their business is to be game ready and fit for the win games, correct, and get that new contract eventually. So,
and it's dependent on how the program that handles the shirts or who's dealing them out into the hobby handles the shirts too. You know, I look at the Pittsburgh Penguins and Sidney Crosby, and people think, oh, he's wearing so many shirts, and he was when he was in 05 and 06 and 06 and 07, he was wearing more than the standard number of sets, and that's a direct correlation with who the equipment manager was. And he still has his one-offs every now and again. You know, they have the December 20th shirts for this year that are being auctioned off right now on NHL auctions. But Crosby is a part of the regular set, unless there's a milestone that he achieved during the normal course of a set. He may have a shirt removed, or he has a particular customization that happens in the middle of a set, and that happened with Malkin and Crosby. They both customized their shirts. Crosby, the shirt that I picked up from last season, was worn in every game that the regular team wore their second set shirts. So you look at Connor McDavid. Connor McDavid, you know, wears one shirt in a color per month. 5, 6, 7 games, who knows? You'll wait for the population report to come out at the end of the year, and that's the way that they're handled, right, wrong, or indifferent. There's going to be a lot of Connor McDavid shirts out there, and I think that that's going to continue throughout his career.
If people will buy them.
Yep.
Oh, yeah, no question.
There'll be a want for them.
But that's why they're going for 12.5 a piece, you know, outside of milestone shirts, rather than if he had one set 1 in each color, one set 2 in each color, and then an alternate, they'd be going for $25,000 a piece.
Yeah, but that doesn't make economic sense if you can sell 3 of them at $12.5 a piece versus 1 of them at $25. You know.
Oh yeah, no question, no question, no doubt about it.
$12.5.
Oh yeah, absolutely, and that's why what's frustrating to me is the hobby is more of a business than it is a hobby anymore.
Well, we just gotta protect what we have. We gotta band together, collect our knowledge, and kind of like protect our own, and understand. You know, there are businesses that are trying to profit off of this, but we gotta do our thing and stand together with each other, as opposed to, you know, all these little fucking battles outside of it because name calling and this, that, and the other. And you know, it comes down to just helping each other out, collecting the information. You know. Too much of that information is gone, and we won't get it back.
Yeah, and I wouldn't bash any dealers per se, because you know there are people that go to dealers to sell their stuff too. I mean, like resale outlet, you know, in that respect. So you may be surprised by what you will find or being offered, or just pops on their website. So they are still good. They do need to make money to stay in business. They have payroll. They have hard.
It's easy to tell the ones that care about the hobby and the ones that don't. And we need to be willing to band together and ensure that we help and protect the ones that actually do care about this hobby. If that makes sense. Otherwise, we won't have the hobby to ourselves or the quality of the hobby that we've come to enjoy.
Yep, no question. I think as we're talking about the vintage days of the hobby back in the Wild Wild West and today's hobby, I think the same thing rings true. Do your homework, no matter where it's coming from. Make sure you figure out what you're dealing with and be educated in making the right decision.
Definitely. That is all the time that we have today. My final message: everybody love everybody. All right, guys. We'll catch you next time. I don't know what the topic is yet, but we'll get it figured out. If you guys want to stay on the call, we'll bullshit around for a little bit. Everybody watching still, the whole 4 of you, appreciate you. Thanks for listening. Everybody have a good night.